Hey everyone, welcome to our third workshop. I'm so excited to have you all here for this workshop. Our workshop's title is When is the Right Time to Switch Jobs? This is a really awesome topic because we've got an amazing guest speaker for you all tonight. And the reason why this is an awesome topic is because this is probably something you've faced or thought about in your work experience. Maybe it's been something that's been on your mind recently. Maybe it's something that's been on your mind in the past, but it's definitely something that's probably crossed your mind. When is the right time to switch jobs? This could be because your company culture is not valuing you, or maybe you've got a bad situation with your supervisor, or maybe you're just kind of bored. You don't feel like you've got any upward momentum, or for any other reason for why you might want to switch jobs. This is the workshop for you to give you insight as to when actually is the right time to switch jobs. How can you go about identifying when that right time is, and how can you put yourself in the best position so then you are properly leveraging the opportunity at hand. Now, one thing we know is that one of the best ways to go about raising your pay level and your title, your actual status within a company's level, is by switching jobs. It's just a fact. What we've observed in the data is that people are less likely to get promoted by staying at the same company year over year. They are much more likely to get promoted faster by switching jobs. In fact, some of the things we see quite often is people leaving a company, going to a different company, getting some experience, and then coming back at a much elevated role than somebody who stayed at that company that entire time. So it's something to definitely consider and think about, but it is not all about switching jobs, and it is really all about when is the right time to switch jobs, because there are sometimes moves that are diagonal moves, there are sometimes moves that are directly vertical moves, there are sometimes horizontal moves that you believe will help you move up vertically even faster, and sometimes the motivation isn't necessarily to move up faster or to make more money. Sometimes it's to get more balance with your life, or sometimes the motivation is to work on something that is more of a calling to you, something that you really are passionate about. It's not about the money anymore. It's okay, whatever your motivations are. This workshop will really shed light on when the right time is to switch jobs. Now, we're going to cover a few key things that you can do to prepare for your mentor relationship and for how to actually go about preparing for switching jobs. And obviously, we've got an amazing guest speaker for you all this evening. But I wanted to talk a little bit about work orientation. Work orientation, that's that measurement that we've leveraged to help match you with your mentor. And this is something that plays a big role into job changes, because we know that, one, your work orientation is fluid. Work orientation is how you view your work. So some people view the work as a job, some people view their work as a career, some people view their work as a calling. If you've logged into your Ambition and Motion dashboard, you'll see that triangle, you'll see where your dot is on the triangle. But it's fluid, meaning that your dot could have changed between January when you took the assessment and right now. And that's, by the way, completely okay. That's completely normal. But what we know is that what motivates you at work will absolutely determine how and when and why you will want to switch jobs. So back to what I was saying earlier, if you're job oriented, that's, by the way, completely okay. It means you're motivated by work-life balance. Your decision to change jobs might be because you're working 80 hours a week and you just can't keep doing it anymore. You got to be home with family. You got things in your life that you want to do more of, and your work is not allowing you to do that. So your motivation is not necessarily more money or a higher status. It could be, hey, I want to work 40 hours a week, or I want to work 30 hours a week, I want to work 20 hours a week. I want to do something that can pay me a little bit of money, allow me to get by, but ultimately allow me to relax and wind down a bit. And that's okay. If you're career oriented, that's where we see a lot of the stereotypical reasons for moving, because it helps you work up the corporate ladder. It helps you get promoted faster. It helps you get a higher pay raise. It helps you learn new skills. Moving jobs is definitely something that's advantageous for someone who's career oriented, because it allows you to try new things. But then the key is, how can you be strategic about that? Our guest speaker will help us with that this evening. And then the last part is your calling. So if you're calling oriented, you might want to switch jobs because you're working for this company and it's just not doing it for you. You're like, yeah, it's fine. The impact on the world that we're making is fine, but it's just not calling to your heart and the impact you want to make on the world. And we end up realizing to ourselves, shoot, we've only got a finite amount of days, years, hours on this earth. We might as well be spending it doing something that we're really passionate about, that's really, we feel like is making a positive difference. We can always get more money, but we cannot get more time. For us, if you're calling oriented, you might determine, you know what, I am switching because I want to be doing something that's meaningful to me. Then the key is, how can you be strategic and put your priorities on a pedestal to ensure that you are getting what you want out of it. Don't get sidetracked by the things that do not motivate you. It can be easy, let's say if you're calling oriented, to start looking for new jobs because you want to find something that you're more passionate about. And then maybe you get 3 different job offers and you end up making a decision based on the amount of money. That would be crazy, but it happens all the time because ultimately you're making this job switch because you wanted to do something you were more passionate about. Ultimately, if you get, let's say, 3 offers and you're calling oriented, the company, the entity, the organization that is the most impactful to you really should be the one that wins out. At the end of the day, sure, your quantitative metrics in terms of how much money you need to be making should be appeased, but after that, you should be looking at impact if that's something that motivates you. If you're job oriented, what's the type of role that's going to give you the most work-life balance? You might have 3 job offers. One is, asking you to work 50 hours a week. One is asking you to work on Saturdays and Sundays. And one says, you know what, hey, you're going to only work 35 hours a week. You're only going to do that over 3 days, Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. Thursdays through Sundays are yours. That might be the thing that you want. You might be, I'm cool with working extended hours on 3 days of the week to get a bunch of hours, make money, and then, the rest of it's essentially a weekend. That could be the way that you perceive work. Whatever it is, make sure that what motivates you, what is the most important factor, is the highest and the most highest thing on your pedestal of what is your decision-making process. So that is just the thing that I really want to stress when it comes to when is the right time to switch jobs, making sure that your priorities are aligned with where you want to go. Now, we're about halfway through the mentor program this spring. Hopefully you've met with your mentor. Hopefully you've already met with your mentor twice. I want you to make the most out of this program. Take advantage of it. Meet with your mentor as many times as you possibly can, and hopefully get yourself to where you want to be. Now, one thing that I really want to stress is that if you are not able to get in contact with your mentor, if you're having any issues, please email support@ambition-in-motion.com. We can answer any questions, comments, concerns, or issues you have with your mentor. Or if you've got kudos, if things are going great and amazing, send it to us. We love hearing those stories. I mean, the positive just makes us feel good that we're making a positive impact. It makes us feel really special that we've done something. So I know often, it's, as the term goes, if it bleeds, it leads. We only want to share the things that are negative in our world. Share the positive stuff. It makes us feel better about what we are doing. We love to hear it. So let's jump in. Now, the one thing that we've talked about in previous workshops that I really want to stress, and I stress it every single time, that is strategy, story, and state. Those are the 3 keys to success in this program. And I'll talk about them in reverse order. State is the most important thing. Physically, what is your state? Physically, where are you at? Physically, what is going on in your world? I don't care if you've had a horrible day, if you're stressed out, if your work is frustrating you. I mean, the whole point of this program is that hopefully we can get your work situation to a point where it's not frustrating you. But regardless of it, when you're going into a mentor meeting, what is your state saying about you? If you're coming in with a negative mentality, if you're coming in with a negative state, you're going to give off negative vibes. Then people are not going to want to help you or be around you. But on the flip side, if you get yourself into a positive state, if you're doing power poses every morning, if you're getting yourself up, moving, working around, and just getting yourself overall in a good feeling and a good mood, because your emotions, by the way, your emotions drive your emotions. You can get yourself into an emotionally positive state by moving around and getting your body going, getting your blood pumping. I tell you that's something that I've learned from Tony Robbins. It's an extremely valuable tool. Make sure that you're leveraging it, but your state is so critical. So what I want to do right now is I want to get you into state. You're about to learn some amazing things from our guest speaker this evening. I want to make sure that you are taking the most out of it and retaining as much information as you can. So what I want you to do is I want you to stand up and I want you to shake it out. I want you to shimmy loose. I want you to scream at the top of your lungs. On the count of 3, scream at the top of your lungs. 1, 2, 3. Yeah! Just let it out. Let it loose. Let it go. You got nothing to lose. I don't care who's looking at you weirdly, if you're at work or if you're in an office or if you're at home. I don't care what's going on. You've got nothing to lose, because at the end of the day, it's about how much are you taking from this program. If you're making the most out of this, you've invested yourself in this program. I want you to make the most out of this. So get yourself into a state conducive for being successful. This goes for any scenario you're going into at work, whether that be a mentor meeting, a colleague meeting, a supervisor meeting. Get yourself into state. Do what you need to do to get yourself prepared physically, because you will then be much more likely to be successful. Now, the next key is your story. What is the story you tell yourself for why you are going to be or not to be successful? I want to think about this in a different way. I want to ask you a question. I would love if you could post your comments in the comments section. But what is a feeling that you want other people to feel about you when you meet them? The reason why I ask this is because it helps us and forces us to be intentional about how we want others to feel about us. Because ultimately, if we're intentional intentional about how we want other people to feel about us, we are much more likely to actually convey that feeling in them. If we're thinking to ourselves, man, I would love if people thought I was confident, or I would love if people thought I was knowledgeable, or I would love if people thought I was kind or empathetic, whatever it is, post in the comments section. I'd love to learn what is a feeling that you would love to convey in other people. But what this does, by being intentional about what feeling we are trying to convey in other people, we can now start taking actions and start doing things that help reinforce that feeling in their minds about who we are, what we're doing. If we can be intentional about how we want other people to feel about us, we are much more likely to be successful. That plays directly into that story thing about why we'll be successful, because sometimes I think it might be easy to perceive, oh, story is just about being confident. Stories is about telling yourself why you're going to be successful, and it is. That's a big part of it. But the other big component to having a good story is understanding every component of how other people interact with you. So you don't want to come in bombastically overconfident and just not being humble. It's about being intentional about how you want other people to feel about you. If you can identify that feeling, post in the comment section. I'd love to learn about it. That will really help you in terms of having the right story. Now, the last key is your strategy. What are the things you are going to do to best prepare yourself for this circumstance? Now, our workshop tonight is about when is the right time to switch jobs. I'm a big proponent of SWOT analysis. SWOT analysis stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. One thing that I would love for you to do, it's great to start a routine every month. Identify what is the strength of staying in my company, what is the weakness of staying in my company, what are the opportunities of moving to a different company, what is the threat of moving to a different company. Identify that. When the opportunities and the weaknesses are greater than the strengths and the threats, it is time to move. That helps you do a personal audit of where you were, where you are, and where you'd like to be. If you don't do that, it can be difficult to know when is the right time to switch. It can be easy to fall into a trap of just doing the same monotonous work day in and day out. By doing consistent SWOT analyses and by doing it monthly, you're much more likely to have a greater understanding of when the right time is to switch. Now, the last thing that I would love and really implore you to try is to share what you're learning about with somebody else. It could be another person in this program. It could be a friend. It could be a significant other. It could be anybody, a family member, whatever. Because what we've learned is that when people who participate in this program share something that they learned about this program with at least 20 other people, their likelihood of achieving their goals in this program increases incrementally. We hypothesize that a big reason for this is that they're teaching other people these skills that they're learning. And when we know that when you teach somebody else something else, it is much more likely to reinforce in your mind. Maybe it could also be the law of attraction. By sharing with other people the things that you're learning in this program, especially your goals, people are now thinking about you for those outcomes. Maybe they're thinking, you know what, Jane Doe, John Doe would be a perfect fit for this thing, and they're going to introduce you. The point I'm making is that when you share this program and what you're learning with more people, the likelihood that you're going to achieve your goals increases substantially. And also, I mean, for future programs, we're actually we're opening up our enrollment for the fall program. If you could encourage other people to participate, we would love to get more people involved, because we know that if you could be an ambassador for this, we are much more likely to make a better impact and a bigger impact on more people. So if you could help encourage more people to enroll in the program, we would love to have that, especially to have your support in that endeavor. So I'm so excited to jump into our guest speaker this evening. We're talking about when is the right time to switch jobs. If you've got any questions about anything at all, any comments, any concerns, any issues with anything, please email us at support@ambition-in-motion.com. I'm so excited for what you all are about to learn this evening. I'm so excited for you to embark on the next half of the Ambition in Motion Mentor program with your mentor. I look forward to seeing what you are all able to accomplish. Let's get going to the next part of this workshop.
Hey everybody, I'm so excited to enter into the interview portion of our workshop this evening. We're here to talk about how to determine when is the right time to switch jobs. And you might be in a career path where you've gotten to maybe your first job and you got into it and you thought it would be like this. And then all of a sudden you came to the realization that this was not exactly what you thought it would be. And you're like, uh-oh, what can I do to determine, one, is the grass in fact greener on the other side? Two, if I have determined that the grass is in fact greener on the other side, what do I need to do about it so that I don't alarm my current employer that I am looking for another job, but at least put myself out there so that I'm not blind or ignorant or not understanding of what opportunity may be in my opportunity wheelhouse. And three, how can we go about also determining, like, hey, maybe it's not as green as we thought on the other side. And here's some things that I might be able to do to adjust my working situation to make it a little bit better. We've got a great guest with us here this evening. We got Michel Mongeau. He is part of our executive mastermind groups, and he has graciously offered his time to share with us his insights on how to effectively determine when is the right time to switch jobs. Michel, thanks for being here.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, Michel, if you could, just for our audience, high level, I don't need a whole biography, but just like a high level, just overview of just who you are, what you do, where you come from, that sort of thing.
Yeah, you already said my name, so I'm going to skip that. I am a product leader in software as a service, generally in the B2B space. I live in Austin, Texas. I lived in Europe, London, and Paris for about 10 years. I'm originally from Montreal or just outside of it. And work actually brought me to Austin, Texas. So I can talk a little bit about that. I went from basically finishing my studies in Europe and got to work in London, and my career has just built up from there to where I am today. Anything specific you want to dig in?
No, I love that. I'm glad that you shared that, because that leads to my very first question is, how did you get into your current role? And you mentioned that you bounced around from Europe, America, Canada, all that sort of fun stuff, which I think, by the way, for a lot of people watching this, I don't know about you, but it sounds super cool to me to be able to work in a totally different country and to ingratiate yourself into a new culture. That sounds super cool. What made you comfortable with making that sort of decision to jump like to these different countries? And how did you go about pursuing those opportunities in those countries? Yeah, I guess we'll start with that.
Yeah, there's got to be some sense of fearlessness when it comes to, well, where am I going to work? Who am I going to work with? What am I going to work on? I think just making the jump from, hey, I've been growing up in Canada for the best part of 25 years, and I got this opportunity to go and do an MBA in Paris, almost all paid. So I thought, well, I'd be an idiot not to. And a lot of people that wouldn't float their boat. But for me, it was this exciting opportunity to discover something new. So I did that, and it kind of led me through this series of hops of, now I'm going to do this. I'm going to start applying what I learned in school. I'm going to find a job and I'm going to start doing that. And then I'm going to learn a little bit more about myself as I go. So one of the first things that I learned is I really enjoy solving problems. I like finding problems and solving problems. So I didn't know at the time that product managers are, that's one of the things that they really enjoy. It took me about a decade to figure that out. But solving problems was one. The second part was, I like learning about different situations, different scenarios, different people, cultural differences, between Paris, London, and Montreal. Sure, it's all the Western world, fair. But very quickly, I started working with companies in Japan and companies in the Middle East, or companies or outsourced talent in Latin America. So I got exposed to all of this diversity, and I really enjoyed it. And it led me to want to solve problems at scale, which is a very different thing. You can be a consultant, for example, and solve a very specific problem for one customer, for one party. That's exciting on its own, but I was hungry to have a bigger impact with the time that I spent working. And that's when I got into software as a service, where, I can actually solve something at scale. And I found that out in my first role, actually, out of school. After my internship, I joined this digital agency that worked on property management, and I found out that we keep solving the same problem almost the same way for all of our customers. And so I went to my boss and I said, I think we can build sort of this base solution that we can tack onto and scale and brand for everybody's desires. And that's when I actually got into product management, but I didn't find that out until another 6 or 7 years later. So that's what got me into what I do now, which is product management, product leadership. And the scaling part is what got me into my leadership roles and executive roles, which is, okay, well, I can do this on my own. I can work with a team, but I have a much more impact. And don't get me wrong, I love the craft of product management. I absolutely love it. When I found that spot, I thought I should have been doing this for like since the start because it's what I really love doing. I'm passionate about it. To give you an example, my Mondays are as exciting as my Fridays, and that says a lot. So when I found out that, oh, I can do this at scale, if I want to scale myself as well, I have to start leading teams. But you've got this imposter syndrome that kind of kicks in of, well, am I really legitimate in actually helping people do better and find out, deficiencies in competence, or like what are the things that they want to do? How, like, would they even trust me? Do I have credibility doing this? So I took the step, and that got me from one place where I was really comfortable. I was doing good work, interesting work, great people, great problem space, and I left. And I went to another company. The grass was not greener. We'll probably touch on that as well, but it wasn't greener, but it allowed me to flex new muscles that I didn't know I had and I could develop, which was how do I lead a team of product managers to do more of what I like doing, and finding people who enjoy it as much as I do is just it's a thrilling experience.
I love it. One, that story encompasses so much of what this whole topic is all about, and I think that's fantastic, Michel. Thanks for sharing that. So you mentioned a variety of different things. I want to start with the first one, which is you realized what you were passionate about, and I love what you said. It's like my Mondays are just as exciting as my Fridays. I think that's something we all emulate towards striving to do. I don't know if we've necessarily all effectively achieved it. I'd be curious to know, well, I guess maybe let me ask the viewers a question real quick. Have you ever switched jobs? And if so, why'd you switch jobs? Post in the comments section. If you've not switched jobs before, I'd love to learn, why might you ever consider switching a job? Post in the comment section. I'd love to learn about it. But Michel, what I would love to know is, how do you go about you mentioned you were comfortable in this role. You were a product manager. You liked doing it. That was really something you were comfortable with. And then you took the leap of faith. I think a lot of people, when they get to a point where they're comfortable, they just kind of sit in the comfort mode because it's comforting. What made you want to go out and take that leap of faith to the next role?
I'm trying to think back. This is a while ago. This is back in 2015 and actually 2017. And it was that sense of comfort that didn't make me feel good. It's a weird thing to explain, because especially in software or in tech, you'll have equity that builds up. You have this comfort that you're not going to lose your job. You're good. You're a subject matter expert. You're extremely valuable to the company. You've built all of these relationships with people that you enjoy working with, and that was true. So with all of these things being true, why would I seek to do something else? Why would I change that? And I think it boils down to I'm a very curious person. I love to learn, and there's that diagram of the magic happens here. There's a circle and there's a dot right on the outside. That's where the magic happens. And if you don't push yourself, and if you're not interested in exploring what that might be, then that's just not me. I remember probably in 2012-ish, I was a project manager and I had this opportunity. I had built up all of this expertise in the software that we had. And I had this opportunity to move back to Paris from London to do pre-sales. So be a solutions consultant, basically work with the sales team and figure out with prospects, how do we go and how do we convince them, but how do we answer all of their questions, and how do we draw a path for them to be successful with the software and evaluate that. And I thought, well, I've never done this before, but that sounds really interesting. And so I got into it. A year and a half later, I thought to myself, well, reflecting back, it's not what I want to do. The concept of all this constant short-term objective of sales, it didn't sit right with me. I'm somebody who likes to plant seeds and then water that garden for a while because I want an entire field of plants. And so there's this comfort that comes with a sense of comfort, I guess. It's really hard to explain, but hopefully that paints a bit of a picture of, I wanted more than what I had, and I wanted to explore more. And I knew that there's a lot of things that I don't know about, and the only way to experience them is to actually jump in and try them. And if it doesn't work, I can always revert back to what I'm really good at. But at least I'm testing it out and seeing, hey, maybe this is another arrow I can put in my quiver, or maybe this is something that I actually want to double down on. And if you don't go and explore it, then you'll never know. And I'm not a complacent type of person, so I have to push those boundaries constantly.
So you brought up the point of it's another arrow in your quiver, and I love that. But I want to be very clear. Like I think for the people watching this, they might like I think one trap within that mentality is who are you doing this for? When I say who are you doing this for, what I mean is that so often people will put an arrow in their quiver based on their parents, their friends, their professors, people they're trying to look good like, people who they think they need to be like. And so they do all this stuff professionally based on who they think they need to be, but not for their own self-efficacy. It's the I got promoted on LinkedIn, and if I entered into a job that I hated, but I refused to leave because everyone's already congratulated me, that's yeah, it's you live your life for you. And I think you communicated this really effectively, but I want to be clear for those that are watching this. Like, don't do this for someone else. Do this for yourself. Do this for you as this is the thing that you want to do. And that quiver in your, that arrow in your quiver or whatever, that's like your own knowledge and experience of life lessons and learning. So you can say, I want to continue trying this thing. Here are the things that I liked about this. Here are the things that I didn't like about this. So like in the example that you're giving, you mentioned that you went from like a product manager to like, potentially leading product managers, but you mentioned that job, the grass wasn't in fact greener on the other side. Tell me more. What about it did you not like? What about it did you like? Like, if you could distill it all down, you know what I mean?
Yeah. The jump that I made wasn't to get into a management role. The first jump that I made after 8 years at the same company was I think I'm getting bored. Very comfortable. I'm sort of still processing your last question, and I think I'm getting bored and I'm hungry for more. And this is not the place where I'm going to be able to explore that. So I went to another company, and the problem space, it's good for 6 months, a year, but the problem space, eventually you either find out this is something I'm passionate about or I'm not. And it's not perfectly binary, but there are certain things that you have affinities for and you develop them or you don't. And so in my case, I went into a problem space that I wasn't passionate about. I could understand it. I thought that I was adding value, but I didn't have that drive of what can I do more today? How much more can I solve? Like, what's a different angle that I can take on this problem? I didn't have that self drive. And so that put me in a state of, okay, well, I made this shift. I can cry over spilt milk that I left really good people in a cool problem space that I cared about to something that I'm less passionate about. Or I can take that and say, well, I've learned something new. And so now I can make a new decision that is going to be informed by two experiences instead of just one. So that's how I try to think about it, is I'm using these different experiences, success or fail, as new pieces of information to make better decisions that I think are more aligned to me. And when I was a kid, I wanted to be a chef. I wanted to be an astrophysicist. There's a bunch of things I wanted to be, and some of them my parents sort of doubled down and said, oh, you should really explore that and explore that. They never sort of pushed me into a corner about anything, but they tried to motivate me to go further into something. And I have to say that I'm assuming that's developed this desire in me to go and test things, go and play around and see what fits, what doesn't. And so when I got into management and really the leadership of teams, like I was saying earlier, huge imposter syndrome, because I thought, why would anybody, like, I'm just a product manager. I may have some domain experience and I've been doing this for a while and I'm comfortable doing it. But like, why would anybody trust me to give them feedback on how they're doing it? And that's a big leap. I think you have to want to make that leap. I think you have to get to a certain level of comfort. And if you can try that out and see, oh, I can actually start mentoring people, or I can have conversations and see that, oh, I can help you gain perspective, or I can give you feedback on something, or I can ask you questions that will make you reflect on how you're approaching something. Those are really the experiences that I thought gave me the courage and the motivation and the self-legitimacy in some sense to go and make that step and say, I could lead this team. So you start having conversations with people who are in leadership positions to see, well, what's your experience in leadership? And then you start talking to people that have decision power over, well, who's going to be leading that team? And you build that network and you build that credibility by having those conversations and expressing your own perspective on how things are. What are the problems that we could solve? What are the challenges? What are the friction points that we currently have? And here's some ideas on how we could approach that. If you're constructive about it, I think you can go pretty much anywhere. I probably veered off a little bit off of your questions, but yeah, that's what came to mind.
That's cool. I know, I love it. And you're kind of going right where I wanted to go, which was the people side of things. I want to ask the audience a question real quick. So those of you who are watching this, have you ever stayed in a job even though the work was annoying, but the people were amazing? Or have you ever stayed in a job where the work was amazing, but the people were annoying and you just did not vibe with them? So I guess, Michel, same question to you. So for those of you watching, post that in the comment section. I'd love to learn if you've ever had a scenario like that. What was the situation? Post it in there. I'd love to learn. But Michel, for you, have you ever been in a scenario like what role does the people play in whether or not you stay or whether or not you go? Like, have you ever had a scenario where you just were working with people that were just awful, but the work was just so tantalizing where you're like, yeah, gosh, this is so interesting? Or have you ever had a scenario where you're like, I'm kind of bored, but gosh, these people are amazing, and like I wouldn't want to give up these relationships for the world? Like, have you ever had a scenario like that?
I always look for both. And the more I spend time in my working life, the more that I realize how those two things are important. Uh, I'll say this: if you have neither, it's really hard to find the motivation to try and face that. Um, you might, but that's a big hill to climb. When you have one but not the other, if you can, what I've done in those situations, I've been in both. I've never been at a company with a team that everybody's toxic, right? Or that I was completely misaligned with. But I have been in situations where one or two people have a behavior that just doesn't gel with me, and it often doesn't gel with other people as well. So there's a conflict of personalities or approach to work or work-life balance or whatever it may be. And I've been at companies where I very much value the people that I work with, but what we're doing doesn't excite me. So in both cases, my approach has been, well, I'm gonna vocalize that. I'm gonna share that feedback to people that I think can start initiating change, with me being the first trigger of, hey, I want to bring this to your attention. This is how I feel about this. Is this something that we can change? And the indication that tells me, well, do I want to keep working here or not? Do I want to face these adversities? Is, am I seeing change? Because I've had all the way up to chief product officer tell me, oh, we're doing all of these changes. You'll see a huge difference over the next 6 months. And so I give it time and I observe. And talk is cheap. Action is hard. Change management is even harder. So if I see that they're making efforts and they're making progress in actually making that change, and it's usually organizational. If I see that they're making those changes happen, then it gives me confidence that this might actually be a case where I've got one up, one down, and the one that's down is slowly going up. We might actually get to a really, really cool fit. But if I don't see that, if I don't see actions being taken and I don't see progress being made, I know that after a few months, if I'm not happy, I need to find something else. Whatever, I mean, that's kind of my philosophy. If I'm not happy somewhere, doesn't mean that I'm not challenged, I don't have friction, I don't have frustrations, but generally happy is something that I strive for with my family, at home, at work, everywhere. So that's an important part of it, and it's my litmus test of, is it worth sticking around or is it not? Am I seeing that positive change? If so, all right, let's double down on that. How can I participate in driving that change as well? And if not, then it's time to look for something else. That's my perspective on it.
You bring up such a good point, though. I mean, you bring it up in your story, and I just want to make sure that the students who are watching this are like seeing this, but you advocated for yourself. That's something that I feel like so few people do, or they really struggle to do. Like, how often do you hear from someone who's frustrated at their job say something like, gosh, my boss sucks. They keep they load me up with all this work, and I keep telling them that I'm overloaded and I don't have time to do this. And then I meet with my CEO, and he says, it'd be really cool if we could do this. And then I don't know, are we going to do this immediately? Or is this something like it would be really cool to do in like a year from now? I've got no context. So now my plate's just overloaded and I've got all these things I need to do. And then you, as the friend who's are just saying, oh, have you ever communicated that you feel this way? Well, I'll say things like, I guess I can take that on. They should get the memo that I'm not particularly happy with this. It's like, no, you said you would take that on. That wasn't very clear that you were frustrated whatsoever, and that you didn't convey a vision for how things could be changed or could be improved. And so all of a sudden people end up leaving, or they're frustrated, they're disgruntled, they're disengaged. But what you did in your story was you went to your boss and you went to the chief product officer and said, hey, here's some issues and challenges that I'm observing going on right now in the organization. Is this something that we can eventually see moving forward? And like the fact that you were clear, you were direct, I think there's so much power in that. I think a lot of people that are really frustrated in their careers, if they just could communicate with their boss and just could share in a respectful way, but in a direct and clear way, the frustrations that they're having with their boss, and ask, like, is it possible for us to work towards a solution of a more nice picture of where the future could be over time? um, I think working work relationships and scenarios could be vastly improved, because no employer wants to lose an employee. And so if they have no idea that you're frustrated, it's really hard for them to change the circumstances. So, I guess maybe I want to ask the audience another question real quick. Post in the comments section. Have you ever had a scenario where you advocated for yourself and just communicated to your boss, something that frustrated you about the work, and the workplace actually changed to accommodate that request? Post in the comment section. If you haven't ever done anything like that, how would you like to do that? How would you like to make your workplace and work scenario better moving forward? Post in the comment section. I'd love to learn about it. So, Michelle, when it comes to just this notion of making work better based on your relationship with your boss and the people that you're working with, you mentioned talk is cheap, actions are hard, change management is hard. How do you go about assessing whether or not the change is sufficient for you to make a switch, a change?
In my experience, it's been mostly subjective,
Okay.
right? So it's not, oh, this metric is tracking differently. It usually won't manifest itself that way, at least in my experience. Um, there's an openness to have the conversation. That's the number one thing, is when you're sharing that feedback, or you're sharing those concerns or those ideas, is the person that you believe can have an impact to that, are they listening? Are they responsive to it? Do they engage in conversation about it? That's one thing. If they don't, and there's like, well, that's what it is, and we just have to deal with it. All right, I'm going to deal with it. You may not like how I deal with it, but I'm going to deal with it, and that can be by leaving.
What
And
about a
so,
scenario with like a boss that's just so big? Like you see this a lot in corporate environments where it's just fire, fire, fire. We're all just like firemen and women out here just putting out fires, putting out fires. But it's like some of the natural domino effects of that are your boss skips in one-on-one with you, and your boss has now skipped his one-on-one with you for the last 5 one-on-ones in a row for every single week, and you're like, okay, well, like I can't even get a meeting on the calendar with you. And then when I do meet with you, we are meeting, you start the meeting late and you cut the meeting short, and it's only you telling me things that you want to see me do, but not coming the other way around. Like I see that happen a lot. How do you Yeah, I don't know. How do you handle a scenario? I mean, I guess it's the same way, but like, yeah, that's just another, like, I guess, another
It's
deeper
just
look into
another
it.
scenario of that
Yeah.
problem. Yeah. So if that's the situation with the person who manages you, that's a really tough situation. It means that that person doesn't have capacity or doesn't want to carve out time for that conversation to happen. So you can become a thorn in their paw in one sense and actually transfer the pain over. That's one way to, to provide more visibility onto what you're feeling. In a remote setting, so right now, our company is fully remote. So if I can't get my boss on Zoom, it's almost impossible to have a conversation. In an in-office setting, and arguably in a remote setting as well, what I've done before, especially as a non-people leader, I'd be the person that would walk around, at one of the companies we had about 3 floors, and I would walk the floors at least weekly. Just have conversations with people, and I'd meet with different folks. So I was a product manager, I'd meet with the head of support, I'd meet with somebody who's in marketing, and so I'd randomly run into people and have conversations. And then I'd find people that I understood would be receptive to my feedback and my ideas or my concerns, my challenges, and that genuinely cared. So I would go and have deeper conversations with them and say, here's the situation I'm in. I can't get a hold of my boss. I don't know what to do anymore. There's some things that are really bothering me, and I'm having doubts about my future at this company or my value or whatever it may be. And so that networking has really given me a lot of good insight in how I can approach the situation. But also it gave me, I wouldn't say back doors, but kind of like side doors to, hey, you're a person that is more of a peer to my boss. Like, how would you approach this? And sometimes they would say, let me see what I can uncover at my next, catch up with this person, to see and feel out where their head's at. Because for all you know, they may be under a tremendous amount of stress for the next 3 months because of X, Y, or Z that you'd have no visibility on. So, I mean, transparency is important, but you can only be transparent to so much without creating noise and removing focus. And so that's an important part or a way that I've used to deal with those situations. And if I still can't get through, I have to ask myself, do I want to work with somebody? Do I want to look up to somebody? Do I want to learn from somebody who doesn't have time to guide me, provide me feedback, or have a conversation with me? That doesn't sound like a healthy work relationship. And at that point, I would still go back to the network and say, hey, this is where I'm at. I still love the company. I love the people that I'm working with, but I don't see my career and my happiness at work going anywhere right now. And you kind of leave it you leave it at that, and then information bubbles, and they may have an idea on, oh well, I love you and my team, and it's not at that point, it's not poaching anymore. You said I'm either going to leave the company or I'm going to do something else. So you kind of you lay your cards on the table and you say, this is where I'm at. And this is what I want to change. And to your point earlier is, if you can be crisp and clear about how you're feeling and what concerns you, then it's easier for everybody else to work with those expectations.
Speaking of sides and backdoor kind of communications, I love that you shared that story about that, because I see that happen all the time, where maybe you got an individual and her relationship with her boss isn't that great, but the work is interesting and her work with her colleagues and her peers is great. And one thing I'll often see is like an individual's relationship with not their boss, but their boss's boss is awesome. It's really amazing. And they're like, man, every time I meet with this person, they're amazing. They gave me great insight and great feedback, or like I feel like I'm heard. But sometimes what will happen is they'll also share the feelings of like being gaslit, where like they'll communicate something to their boss's boss, and it seems like it'll be good to go, but then nothing ends up happening with it. And so they're like, gosh, like, is it being heard? Like, what's going on? What don't I know? And you brought up a great point of like, there's some information that not everyone's privy to, and we just kind of have to deal with that. Also, there's also just the natural hierarchy where, your boss might, after learning of you going to someone else, be like, Michel did what? went around my
Right.
back asking about what's going on with me. I'm being silly, but that
You
might
get
be the,
FaceTime at that point.
yeah, well, I guess you'll get FaceTime at that point. That's right. So how do you go about, I guess maybe what I'd be curious to know is like from the very get-go, like from the interview process, can you identify how a culture is going to be and like whether or not it'll work with you or not work with you from the very beginning? Or is it something that you can really only develop through time and rapport?
I always go back to, if I'm open about my expectations, about my ambitions, about how I work, how I want to work, who I want to work with, and not who specifically people, but the type of people that I want to work with, or that I work with best. Those are the, you you shouldn't fake alignment in interviews. It's a recipe for disaster, because you're going to portray yourself as somebody that you're not, and you'll get frustrated because you've now set the expectations that no, you're perfectly aligned with, how the interviewer is setting expectations and sharing how they work, and it'll lead to frustration and likely failure as well. So I say be open, because if you find the team that actually values who you are, you're naturally going to fit in. And so I'll give you an example. For me, when I go into an interview, I want to see if the person is willing to have a conversation. I extremely value the exchange of ideas, of perspectives, of opinions, and so on. So for me, an interviewer that comes in and they can be, as welcoming as they want to be, but if they just ask a question and I can tell that all they want is the answer and they move on to the next question, that's it for me. That's a huge red flag, because they're looking at this as a transaction, not as a relationship. And so that's everything to me. I don't want to work in a place where we're treating each other as transactions. And so if I don't get a sense that I can have an exchange, a conversation with you, I'm out. So that's one of the things that I think is a good indicator of, do I think I'm going to be able to fit in here? And are they going to fit with me as well? And that's the whole point. Interview is sort of the secondary part of the word. The primary is enter. If you don't actually engage in conversation, I think you're missing the point of the interview. It shouldn't be one-sided. And I've been in so many interviews where the person would say, "So we're gonna do you have any questions before we start?" And at that point, well, you don't really. And then they go through this series of questions, and they kind of they preface it with, I'll try to keep 10, 15 minutes at the end to make sure that I can answer any questions you have. Like, that's kind of a crappy way of setting up this interview. I don't feel like we're going to be in an exchange. I feel that you have a series of checkboxes and you're going to try and tick them. And if you don't, then that's that. And I don't want to work with people who think that way, especially when it comes to human relationships.
That's so funny. I'm just envisioning like the most automaton interview process ever, where it's like the interview comes in, they're like, "Michelle, how are you doing today?" And you're like, "Oh, I'm doing excellently. Although the weather was a little bit crummy, and I did run into a pothole on the way here. Overall, pretty solid on the whole." They're like, "Michelle, I got a check box for good or bad. Which one do you want me to check, buddy?" I'm being a
Yep.
goofball, but
Yep.
it's the point is that, yeah, if it feels like a transaction, I think that's a really good way of just knowing that this may not be the right fit and they're just looking to fill a box, and that's really
And
good.
that's me,
Yeah,
right?
that's
That's
a great
me,
point.
because
I think,
there are other people that they want clear instructions.
yeah, exactly,
I
and
don't
that's a
want
good
clear
point.
instructions. I want a vague, ambiguous problem and have me work on it. So it's very different.
That's a great point, and that's exactly it. Yeah, don't. I would say another question for the audience: post in the comment section. What are your values? Post them in the chat. Like, what are the things that you look for? I think so often people don't know what they're looking for. They're like, "I'm looking for something to consume my time and that will pay me money." Cool, you got it. There's a whole lot of those. You can be doing a variety of different things, but what is it that actually you value? And that comes from an interpersonal interaction perspective. That comes from a type of work that you're doing perspective. It comes from the problems that you're solving perspective. Like, post it in the comments section. Just because for Michel, I mean, you're a product manager, you like the vague, you like the ambiguous. You want to be able to take a very murky situation and create clarity from it, because that's what you do. You're in product. But not everybody's like that, and that's okay. I'm not saying it's good or it's bad, but you should clarify what your values are going to enter any interview process, because if you don't, you're gonna try to mold yourself into whatever it is that they're looking for, not necessarily whether or not you all fit together. And nothing will likely create more frustration than you trying to chameleon yourself into some wrong scenario, and they're like, we were upfront the whole time that we were looking for people to do X, Y, and Z. And you're like, but I hate X, Y, and Z. It's like, well, that's on you. Like, it wasn't like we, bait and switched you. You told us you like doing X, Y, and Z. And, anyways, I think that's a really good point, is identify what your values are going into a scenario. Also, what are your thoughts on like auditing your values and like getting an update on them throughout like your career? Because it's not like they're like the values you had, I would imagine, back in 2015, 2016, 2017, when you're traveling through Europe, might be a little bit different now, maybe as like you have a family, and as like, or maybe you don't have a family. As your life changes, your values, I would imagine, also change. How often do you do like values audits? How would you suggest people do?
I actually started documenting what I value at work in 2019, 2018, 2019. And I'd say that there are some core things that stay with you. Like, it's just the way that you operate as a person, the things that you like, the things that you don't like, your personality, right? And then as your environment changed, for example, you now have a family, you have a 6-month-old and 2-year-old. Well, things may shift a little bit in terms of, what takes priority. And so I started documenting those, and I'd encourage anybody to go through the same exercise. And I'd say once a year, you kind of go back and you look at them, because it's so, you brought up a really good point of being a chameleon. And I think as humans, we have this sort of this habit, or this reflex of trying to fit in. So you've applied somewhere, you've spent energy trying to convince people that you're the right person for it, and then they start sending you sort of a 15-degree angle that way instead of sort of straight on. You're like, well, of course I can do that, and I really enjoy that. Here's some examples that kind of fit into that. And so we're going to try and make that, it's not a square peg into a round hole, but say it's like, well, you add a side, basically. And so that makes it even harder. And having gone through the exercise of writing what you value and the things that you want to stay away from, I think is just as valid as well. And reminding yourself of what those are and reading through those before an interview adds a lot of, you're going in better equipped to react to those things, to those curveballs, and for you to assess, is this something that I really want, or is it not? And after the interview, you can go back to that list and say, well, here's how I felt as part of the interview. Does it check my boxes from a value perspective? And if it does, great, keep going. If it doesn't, seriously consider if you actually want to continue investing in that particular, in that company, in that role, or whatever it may be. And so I don't know if I audit them, but I reflect on them on a periodic basis, just to make sure that these are still the things that are important to me, and the things that I want to make sure are there in a company that I join and in a team that I join. Otherwise, I'll just be miserable, and I know that I will be. And it's something that, when you start your career, you have these ambitions, or you're in a particular state of mind. And as you go through your career, there's tons of information that you can gather to refine what it is that truly matters to you, because you make a lot of assumptions on what matters to you because you haven't had that experience yet, or you're inheriting them from other people, or from singular experiences. As you build that up over multiple experiences, multiple teams, multiple roles, problem space, and so on, I think it gives you a better weapon to figure out, do I want to keep going, or do I want to go after something else?
Michelle, this has been great. This has been a really good workshop on how to effectively determine when is the right time to switch jobs. I think you've given the audience a lot of really great insights as just to like, how can I go about evaluating what's important for my situation, what's important for me? And I think that's what's super critical for anybody in determining when is the right time to switch jobs. Is there any final imparting wisdom that you'd like to share with our audience?
I'll go back to something that I said earlier is, um, and we just talked about it now. Don't be a chameleon. Don't try to fit in. And that doesn't mean don't adapt, don't evolve, don't learn, but put a lot of weight on the things that you value, because those are going to determine in large part whether you're going to be happy at work or not, whether you're going to get a sense of fulfillment, whether you're going to feel rewarded at work. All of those things are critical. We spend our waking life working. So make the most of it. There's opportunities. And I know right now, for example, the job market is weird and bad. So it's not ideal, but if you sacrifice what you value, you're just going to be miserable. And sometimes, you have to bite the bullet and say, well, I have to put food on the table. So I need to sort of bend here or there to do something. But in the long run, always prioritize what you value, what's important to you. And I'd say the problem space, the people, largely not in that order, but the people, what type of people that you want to work with. And if you don't get a sense of excitement going to work on Monday, chances are you need to at least evaluate, is this something I want to keep doing? The next step I make may not be a greener grass, but if you don't take a shot, you'll never know, and you might just be half miserable for the rest of it. So it's just not worth it.
Amazing. Michelle, thanks for sharing this. This has been awesome. Students and viewers watching this, thanks for your time and attention. Have a wonderful rest of your day. I look forward to seeing you at our next workshop.
Thanks.